Norfolk Island is an external Australian territory located in the South Pacific, situated between New Zealand and New Caledonia. Along with Phillip and Nepean Islands, it forms a territory of 35 square kilometres with a population of 2,188 as of 2021. Its capital is Kingston. While East Polynesians were the original inhabitants, the island was empty when Great Britain established a penal colony in 1788. This settlement operated until 1855, except for an 11-year abandonment period. In 1856, permanent civilian residency began when descendants of the famous Bounty mutineers were relocated there from Pitcairn Island. The United Kingdom formally transferred Norfolk Island to Australia in 1914. The island's primary symbol is the native Norfolk Island pine, which features on its flag and remains a significant ornamental export worldwide. Historically, although Europeans found the island uninhabited, archaeological evidence confirms 13th or 14th century settlement by East Polynesian seafarers, likely from New Zealand or the Kermadec Islands. Discoveries of Melanesian artifacts also suggest potential contact from New Caledonia. However, these early populations disappeared several centuries before European arrival, likely due to the island's extreme isolation and a challenging environment for long-term horticulture. The island's isolation initially discouraged long-term survival for early settlers. Captain James Cook was the first European to land there in 1774, naming it after the Duchess of Norfolk. Proposals by Sir John Call highlighted the island's uninhabited status and the presence of New Zealand flax as strategic advantages. Following the American Revolutionary War, British prisons became overcrowded because transportation to the American colonies ceased. Consequently, the British government announced plans in 1785 to send convicts to Australia. By 1786, Norfolk Island was officially designated as an auxiliary settlement within the broader colonisation plan. For New South Wales, the decision to colonise Norfolk Island was accelerated when Russia's Empress Catherine II restricted hemp sales, threatening the Royal Navy's supply of cordage and sailcloth. In 1788, Governor Arthur Phillip dispatched Lieutenant Philip Gidley King with 15 convicts and 7 free men to develop the island commercially. The settlement, initially called Sydney, grew as more convicts arrived. However, the mission faced setbacks, including the 1790 wreck of the HMS Sirius. Despite individual efforts to cultivate the land, such as those by Quartermaster Robert Watson, the island's remote nature and high maintenance costs began to draw criticism from colonial leadership. By 1794, Lieutenant Governor Francis Grose suggested closing the penal settlement due to its remoteness and difficult shipping access. Evacuations began in 1805, and by 1813, the remaining settlers were removed. To prevent other European powers from claiming the territory, buildings were destroyed and livestock slaughtered. The island remained uninhabited from 1814 until 1825. However, in 1824, the British government ordered a reoccupation. This second settlement was intended specifically for the worst description of convicts. The island's extreme isolation, once considered a liability, was now viewed as a perfect asset for detaining and punishing the most recalcitrant male prisoners. The second settlement was long rumored to house only the most hardcore recidivists, men spared the gallows for fresh crimes committed in Australia. However, a 2011 study revealed that over half of the 6,458 convicts had no colonial convictions, and only 15% were death sentence respites. Most were actually non-violent property offenders serving roughly 3 years. Despite this, the era was marked by unrest, including failed mutinies between 1826 and 1846. Britain began winding down the settlement in 1847 as transportation to Tasmania ceased. By May 1855, the last convicts were removed, ending the island's secondary role as a penal colony. The modern era began on June 8, 1856, with the arrival of 194 Pitcairn Islanders. These were descendants of the Bounty mutineers and Tahitians who had outgrown the limited resources of Pitcairn Island. They repurposed the existing penal buildings and established industries based on farming and whaling. Although a few families returned to Pitcairn in subsequent years, the population on Norfolk grew as they welcomed new settlers, many of whom arrived via whaling vessels. This period established the unique cultural and ancestral foundation of the current resident population, blending maritime traditions with their established communal lifestyle from Pitcairn. In the Age of Sail, Norfolk Island served as a vital resort for whaling ships, starting with the Britannia in 1793 and ending with the Andrew Hicks in 1907. Ships visited for timber, water, and provisions, often recruiting locals as crew. Concurrently, the Melanesian Mission of the Church of England established its headquarters there in 1867 before moving to the Solomon Islands in 1920. Administerially, the island saw frequent shifts. It began as part of New South Wales, transferred to Van Diemen's Land in 1844, and became a distinct and separate settlement in 1856 under the NSW governor's supervision. In 1897, the separate office of Governor of Norfolk Island was abolished, and administration was officially vested in the Governor of New South Wales, though the island remained a separate entity. This arrangement continued after the Commonwealth of Australia was established in 1901. Transition to modern Australian rule finalised with the Norfolk Island Act 1913, which saw the territory accepted by the Australian Parliament. This handover, finalised in 1914 through a UK Order in Council and Australian proclamation, effectively replaced all previous laws with a new administrative code, marking the island's formal entry as a territory under the Australian federal government. The 1913 administration law established an administrator and a criminal code for Norfolk Island. In July 1914, the handover from the UK was completed. During World War II, the island's strategic value increased, serving as a key airbase and refueling station between Australia, New Zealand, and the Solomon Islands. Servicemen from multiple Allied nations constructed the airstrip in 1942. Because Norfolk fell under New Zealand's area of responsibility, it was garrisoned by N-Force, a large New Zealand Army unit. Despite its importance, the island's remoteness kept it from being directly attacked, and the garrison departed by early 1944. In 1979, the Australian government granted Norfolk Island limited self-government, allowing residents to elect a local government for their internal affairs. However, by 2006, a formal review considered revising this model. Although no immediate changes were made then, financial difficulties and declining tourism forced the island's administration to seek federal assistance in 2010. In exchange for a bailout, islanders agreed to pay federal income tax for the first time while gaining access to wider welfare benefits. However, negotiations stalled for years, leading to economic hardship and many residents leaving the island to find work or social support elsewhere. In 2015, the Australian government replaced self-government with a local council against the local government's wishes. A referendum showed 68% of voters opposed these forced changes, citing a lack of consultation. Friction between the island and Australia was highlighted in a 2019 Shark Week episode regarding the island's policy of culling cattle. Islanders traditionally fed older cattle carcasses to tiger sharks far offshore to prevent them from approaching the beaches in search of food. Norfolk Island hosts one of the world's largest tiger shark populations, making this a sensitive issue for local safety and the vital tourism industry. Australia eventually banned the cattle culling policy on the grounds of animal cruelty, causing locals to fear increased shark attacks. In October 2015, the island's time zone shifted to UTC plus 11 o'clock. By March 2015, the Australian government announced major reforms to address the island's lack of financial sustainability. Consequently, the Norfolk Island Legislative Assembly was abolished in June 2015. The territory transitioned to administration by an advisory council until a regional council took office in 2016. From that point, most Australian Commonwealth laws, including taxation, social security, and immigration, were extended to apply fully to the island's residents. Following the 2016 reforms, travel between Norfolk and mainland Australia became domestic. Residents began voting in mainland electorates, specifically the ACT electorate of Canberra and later the division of Bean. These changes sparked significant opposition. The Norfolk Island People for Democracy, Inc., formed to appeal to the United Nations, seeking status as a non-self-governing territory. Some residents even explored the idea of joining New Zealand. A 2019 survey revealed divided loyalties. 37% favoured free association with New Zealand, 35% with Australia, and 25% desired full independence, while only 3% preferred full integration with the Australian mainland. Geographically, the territory of Norfolk Island is located in the South Pacific, east of Australia. The main island covers 34.6 square kilometres, featuring 32 kilometres of coastline and no significant internal water bodies. Mount Bates, the highest point, rises 319 metres in the northwest. Much of the land is suitable for agriculture. Phillip Island, the territory's second largest landmass, sits 7 kilometers south. Both islands were formed by basaltic volcanic eruptions between 3.1 and 2.3 million years ago. While much of the volcanic deposit has eroded, 4 distinct basalt strata remain, marking the islands as the highest points of the submerged Zealandia continent. The islands are geologically diverse, with Nepean Island composed of coarse marine calcareous rock from the late Pleistocene era. Norfolk Island's coastline is largely defined by steep cliffs, though the land slopes downward toward the original settlement sites at Slaughter Bay and Emily Bay. Shipping is difficult because the island lacks a safe natural harbor. Goods must be brought in by ship and unloaded onto jetties at Kingston or Cascade Bay. Emily Bay is the only safe area for recreational swimming due to a protective coral reef, whereas Anson and Ball Bays are frequented by surfers seeking larger waves. The climate is mild and subtropical with minimal seasonal variation. The Norfolk Island National Park preserves approximately 10% of the land, including remnants of the original subtropical rainforest. The park also encompasses Nepean and Phillip Islands. Phillip Island once suffered severe ecological damage from introduced pigs and rabbits, which stripped vegetation and left the island a distinctive red-brown color. However, recent pest control and remediation efforts by park staff have started to restore the environment. The main residential and commercial hub is Burnt Pine, which houses the island's shopping center, post office, and community hall along Taylor's Road. Population settlement is spread across the island in widely separated homesteads. Kingston remains the ceremonial center, housing Government House, the administrator's residence, and various government buildings like the Court and Legislative Assembly. However, Burnt Pine is the primary economic engine. Climate-wise, the island experiences warm, humid summers and mild, rainy winters. The record high is 28.5 degrees Celsius, and the low is 6.2 degrees Celsius. Annual rainfall averages 1,109.9 millimeters, peaking in winter. Environmental classifications place the island within the Pacific Subtropical Islands, biogeographic region, specifically subregion PSI02. And it is recognized as a unique terrestrial ecoregion for its subtropical forests. Norfolk Island's flora includes 174 native plants, of which 51 are endemic and 18 are rare or threatened. Notable endemic species include the Norfolk Island palm and the smooth tree fern, the tallest of its kind in the world. Historically, the island was blanketed in subtropical rainforest dominated by the Norfolk Island pine and various palms and ferns. Today, only a small 5 square kilometer tract of this original forest remains within the national park, which was established in 1986. This remnant forest faces ongoing challenges from introduced plant species that have infested the area since European colonization began. The cliffs of Mount Pitt once supported a thriving community of native shrubs and climbers, but much of the island has been cleared for housing and pasture. Introduced weeds and grazing animals now pose a significant threat to the native flora, with weed species currently outnumbering native ones. The island's animal life also shows high endemicity but has suffered greatly. Massive deforestation and the introduction of mammalian predators like rats, cats, and pigs have led to numerous extinctions. Endemic birds were also historically persecuted as agricultural pests, further decimating populations that were already vulnerable due to their limited geographic range. Many of the island's native birds share biological affinities with New Zealand species, such as the Norfolk kaka and Norfolk pigeon. Tragically, several endemic species and subspecies, including the starling, thrush, and ground dove, are now extinct. The bubuk owl's pure lineage is extinct, though its genes survive in a hybrid population. Currently, the white-chested white-eye is feared extinct, while the Norfolk parakeet and jerrigan remain. Subfossil evidence also points to a now extinct, undescribed species of snipe. The island remains a critical site for avian research, though the loss of biodiversity due to human activity and invasive species is profound. Nepean and Phillip Islands are essential breeding grounds for seabirds. The Providence petrel, once hunted to local extinction, is now returning to breed on Phillip Island. Other residents include the white-necked petrel, Australasian gannet, and the sooty tern, whose eggs are traditionally harvested by locals. BirdLife International identifies Norfolk and Nepean as an important bird area, EBA, because they support the entire global populations of several endemic species and over 1% of the world's wedge-tailed shearwaters. Phillip Island is also categorized as a separate EBA, underscoring the region's global significance for seabird conservation. The island features a diverse botanical garden and is home to the Norfolk swallowtail butterfly. However, land mammals are nearly non-existent. The only native species, Gould's wattled bat, is extremely rare and potentially extinct. Marine life is more abundant, though commercial whaling until 1956 depleted large whale populations. Today, humpback and minke whales are still seen, but southern right whales have vanished due to historical illegal whaling by Soviet and Japanese fleets. Whale sharks are also occasionally sighted. These marine species are now the focus of scientific surveys rather than the commercial hunts that once dominated the local economy. The population of Norfolk Island was 2,188 in 2021, showing a decline from its 2001 peak. The census indicates an aging population, as many young adults move away for education and work. Most residents have British or European Tahitian ancestry, with about half tracing their lineage back to the bounty mutineers from Pitcairn. This shared heritage resulted in a limited number of surnames, leading to a unique local custom. The island's telephone directory includes nicknames for residents. Common monikers like carrots, lettuce leaf, and pumpkin help distinguish between subscribers who otherwise share identical last names. Population growth is currently stagnant at 0.01%. Ancestry data from 2016 shows a mix of Australian, English, Pitcairn Islander, Scottish, and Irish roots. Citizenship is predominantly Australian, 79.5%, followed by New Zealander, 13.3%. Religion plays a significant role, with 62% of islanders identifying as Christian. The religious landscape was shaped by the death of the first chaplain in 1884, leading to the formation of Methodist and Seventh-day Adventist congregations. The latter gained influence from American whalers and the religious shifts of Pitcairn descendants. These developments created a diverse denominational environment that persists on the island today. The Catholic Church established a presence in 1957, and a charismatic fellowship emerged in the late 1990s. 2021 census data indicates that 22% are Anglican, 13% Uniting Church, and 11% Roman Catholic. Notably, the number of residents identifying with no religion rose to 35.7%. Church attendance is generally low, with congregations rarely exceeding 30 people. The island's Anglican churches, All Saints and St. Barnabas Chapel, are part of the Diocese of Sydney. St. Philip Howard serves the Catholic community. While facilities are well maintained, ministers are often short-term visitors rather than permanent residents of the island. Religious statistics from 2016 show a Protestant majority, 46.8%, alongside Catholics, 12.6%, and a significant non category, 26.7%. Most residents were born in Australia, 39.7%, followed by Norfolk Island itself, 22.1%, and New Zealand, 17.6%. The island's linguistic heritage is unique. Locals speak both English and Norfolk, a Creole blending 18th century English and Tahitian. However, Norfolk's usage is declining as tourism increases and youth migrate. To combat this, local authorities use dictionaries and Norfolk signage for attractions. In 2004, the Norfolk Island Assembly officially recognized Norfolk as a co-official language of the territory. The 2004 Language Act officially protects Norfolk, identifying it as the tongue of the Pitcairn descendants. While its use is encouraged and protected, official government use requires an English translation. In 2011, about 3/4 of the permanent population could speak Norfolk, though only 32% spoke a language other than English in their daily lives. Education is centered at the Norfolk Island Central School, which serves students from kindergarten to year 12. For many years, the school operated under a memorandum with the New South Wales Department of Education to ensure high standards of curriculum and service. As of January 2022, the Queensland Department of Education took over the school's management from New South Wales. While the NSW curriculum remains in transition, the school continues to teach both English and Norfolk to preserve local heritage. There is no tertiary education on the island, so students typically move to the mainland for university. However, the school partners with vocational training organizations and local employers to provide trade courses. Literacy rates are estimated to be comparable to mainland Australia, as the education system has historically mirrored the high standards and curriculum of the New South Wales state system. Norfolk Island's culture is a unique adaptation of Polynesian influences from the Pitcairn settlers, seen in local cuisine and the hula dance. Residents favor an outdoor lifestyle, with fishing and aquatic activities being central pastimes. Most families are involved in primary production, such as farming. While religion is a cultural cornerstone for older generations, active church attendance is only about 8%. Interestingly, businesses observe traditional hours, closing on Wednesday and Saturday afternoons and all-day Sunday. This blend of Tahitian heritage and colonial tradition creates a distinct social rhythm that differs significantly from mainland Australian life. The island has been home to notable authors like Colleen McCullough and Ruth Park, and singer Helen Reddy. Its history and landscape have inspired literary works like The Thornbirds and Michener's Tales of the South Pacific. Uniquely, Norfolk is one of the few places outside North America to celebrate Thanksgiving. The island's heritage is preserved through various museums, including the Bounty Museum. The Kingston and Arthur's Vale Historic Area is a World Heritage Site, recognized for its link to the Australian convict sites. These landmarks serve as both tourist attractions and vital reminders of the island's complex penal and civilian history. Local cuisine mirrors that of the Pitcairn Islands, blending British and Tahitian styles. Traditional dishes include mudder, banana dumplings, and kamara pili. Unlike Pitcairn, Norfolk cuisine also features fruit pies and chopped salads. In terms of governance, Norfolk was the only non-mainland territory with self-rule under the 1979 Act until 2015. Currently, an administrator appointed by the Australian government, George Plant, holds authority. Historically, a 9-seat legislative assembly was elected every 3 years, though the Australian Parliament always maintained the power to override local laws or extend federal legislation to the island at its discretion. The former legislative assembly used a weighted first-past-the-post voting system. From its members, an executive council was formed to advise the administrator. Norfolk Island famously avoided party politics, with most candidates running as independents, though an Australian Labor Party branch formed in 2007. The last chief minister was Lyle Snell, who oversaw portfolios ranging from tourism to environment. This independent governance style emphasized community-focused leadership over mainland political platforms. However, the lack of party structure and the small scale of the administration eventually faced challenges in maintaining economic self-sufficiency without external federal support. Since 2018, islanders have been required to vote in Australian federal elections within the division of Bean and are represented in the Senate by ACT representatives. Enrollment is compulsory. The path to this integration began with a 2006 review that initially left governance unchanged to avoid economic disruption. However, in 2010, Chief Minister David Buffett announced a voluntary surrender of self-government in exchange for a federal financial bailout. This surprising move was prompted by significant debt. It signaled the beginning of the end for the island's unique autonomous status as the federal government sought more direct control. In March 2015, the Commonwealth officially revoked self-governance, citing the island's inability to achieve self-sufficiency and its reliance on a $12.5 million annual subsidy. This change meant residents would begin paying federal income tax while gaining access to Medicare and Centrelink. In response, the local assembly held a referendum where 68% of voters demanded the right to determine their own political status and insisted on being consulted before any changes were finalized. This vote highlighted a deep rift between the desires of the local population for autonomy and the Australian government's focus on fiscal and administrative stability. Chief Minister Lyle Snell argued that the referendum results proved Canberra's reforms lacked local support. Nevertheless, the Australian Parliament passed the 2015 Amendment Act, abolishing self-government and transitioning the island into a local council framework. New South Wales initially provided state-based services until 2022, when Queensland took over these responsibilities. The capital remains Kingston, though it functions more as a government precinct than a residential centre, with Burnt Pine serving as the main settlement. The most significant local holiday is Bounty Day, celebrated every June 8 to commemorate the Pitcairn Islanders' arrival in 1856. The island's legal system is based on Australian common law, supplemented by local ordinances. Suffrage is universal at age 18. As a territory, Norfolk lacks independent diplomatic representation and does not participate in most international organisations. Its flag features a central Norfolk Island pine on a green and white field. Since 2016, the Norfolk Island Regional Council has handled local governance, mirroring the structures found in mainland Australia. This shift was intended to standardise administration, yet many islanders remain loyal to the symbols and traditions of their previous autonomous status, viewing the new council as a reduction of their identity. Constitutionally, the island's history is complex. It was part of New South Wales until 1844, then annexed to Van Diemen's Land. The 1855 Wastelands Act gave the Queen the power to separate Norfolk from Tasmania, which led to its 1856 status as a distinct and separate settlement. Under this arrangement, the NSW governor acted as the governor of Norfolk Island with the power to make laws. This created a period where the island was effectively self-governing and separate from the standard British Settlements Act, establishing a historical precedent that many modern islanders use to argue for their right to independence. In 1894, the British government investigated Norfolk's justice system, coinciding with Australia's movement toward federation. Correspondence between the governors of Norfolk, New Zealand, and the UK revealed that locals preferred New Zealand's control over New South Wales if changes were inevitable. However, Britain decided that the NSW governor would administer the island without making it an official part of the colony. This maintained Norfolk's separate status while preparing for future annexation to any federal body NSW might join. Crucially, residents were not on the NSW electoral roll, emphasizing their continued distinction from the mainland's political structure. Norfolk Island was formally accepted as an Australian territory under the 1913 Act, becoming effective in 1914. It gained limited self-government in 1979. Over the years, the Australian government's authority has been challenged in court 4 times. In 1939, Samuel Hadley unsuccessfully argued that only laws from the 1856 Order in Council were valid. These legal battles highlight a persistent tension between the federal government's desire for administrative uniformity and the islanders' belief in their historical and constitutional uniqueness. Each challenge has forced the High Court to clarify the exact nature of the island's relationship with the Commonwealth. In 1965, the Supreme Court rejected Henry Newberry's claim that Australia could not abolish the island's 1857 legislature. The court ruled that the 1855 Wastelands Act allowed the Crown to impose any form of government, including Australian authority. Later, in 1972, the government moved to prevent Norfolk from being a tax haven. Berwick Limited challenged this, arguing that Norfolk, as an external territory, was not constitutionally part of Australia. However, the High Court unanimously ruled in 1976 that Norfolk Island is indeed part of Australia, reinforcing the federal government's power to regulate taxes and administration across the territory. In 2004, Australia removed the right for non-citizens to stand for the local assembly. This was challenged on the grounds that Norfolk was not part of Australia in a constitutional sense, and that the move undermined self-government. In 2007, the High Court rejected these arguments, reaffirming that residency did not override citizenship requirements for voting and that Norfolk remained an integral part of the Commonwealth. This series of rulings has consistently upheld federal authority, concluding that the island has no international status independent of Australia, much to the frustration of those seeking greater local autonomy. The Australian government maintains that Norfolk Island has been an integral part of the Commonwealth since 1914. Consequently, the UN Decolonisation Committee does not list it as a non-self-governing territory. However, some residents dispute this, claiming Queen Victoria granted them independence when they resettled from Pitcairn. The 2016 reforms, which repealed sections of the 1979 Act recognizing the island's unique history, sparked mass protests. Locals felt their specific heritage was being erased in favor of administrative convenience, leading to a renewed movement to preserve their distinct political and cultural identity through international appeals. In 2015, the Norfolk's Choice campaign took its fight for autonomy to the United Nations, with a formal petition lodged in 2016. Proposals for the island's future have varied. A UK MP suggested it become a British overseas territory, while the last Chief Minister, Lyle Snell, proposed full independence funded by fishing and offshore banking. Since 2016, the island's laws have been in transition. While New South Wales laws were temporarily suspended, as of 2018, all NSW laws applied laws, subject to federal amendment. This includes the application of a modified version of the NSW Local Government Act. Historically, Norfolk Island maintained separate immigration controls, making entry difficult even for Australian citizens. In 2012, these rules were relaxed, allowing easier entry for Australians and New Zealanders who passed police checks and paid into the local health scheme. However, on July 1, 2016, the Australian migration system fully replaced local arrangements. This shift integrated the island into the Australian migration zone, meaning travellers from Norfolk to the mainland no longer depart the zone. While simplifying movement for citizens, it marked the end of the island's ability to strictly control who settled on its shores. Under current rules, Australian citizens can travel to the island with just photo identification, while all other nationalities must carry a passport. Permanent residents of the island who are not citizens can apply for Australian citizenship and move to the mainland freely. Children born on the island are automatically Australian citizens. These changes have streamlined the legal status of residents but removed a layer of local control that had been used to preserve the island's unique social demographic. The integration into the broader Australian immigration framework ensures that the territory remains legally indistinguishable from the mainland for travel purposes. Healthcare is provided by the Norfolk Island Hospital, the only medical facility. Since 2016, treatment has been covered by Medicare and the Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme. While the hospital handles minor surgeries, serious conditions require evacuation to the mainland, which can cost up to $30,000, now covered by the government. Emergency evacuations are provided by Australian Retrieval Services. Despite these improvements, the lack of specialised local facilities remains a challenge, often forcing older residents to relocate to Australia or New Zealand for long-term care. This reflects the common struggle of providing modern healthcare in extremely remote communities. The island has one ambulance staffed by a St. John officer and volunteers. Defence is provided by the Australian Defence Force, ADF, though there are no permanent military installations. Under Operation Resolute, the Royal Australian Navy and Border Force patrol the waters to ensure maritime security. The aging Armidale-class patrol boats are currently being replaced by larger Arafura-class vessels to better handle these remote missions. These patrols protect a wide range of offshore territories, ensuring that Norfolk Island remains secure within Australia's broader maritime strategy while allowing the ADF to respond quickly to any regional emergencies. In 2023, joint military exercises between Australia and the US near Norfolk Island highlighted its potential as a staging base for regional disaster relief and peacekeeping. Civilian law enforcement is handled by a small team of Australian Federal Police, AFP, consisting of 3 regular officers and 5 local special members. These local members have police powers but are not full AFP employees. This hybrid model allows for professional mainland standard policing while maintaining a level of local involvement and knowledge, which is crucial for managing a small, tightly knit community with unique customs and a distinct local history. The judicial system includes a court of petty sessions for minor matters and a Supreme Court for serious offences and federal law. Judges are typically appointed from the Federal Court of Australia and may hold sessions on the mainland or on the island. Only one lawyer currently maintains a full-time practice on the island, and practitioners must hold a specific Norfolk Island certificate. Historically, the island conducted its own censuses, but since 2016, this has been integrated into the Australian Bureau of Statistics national counts. These changes have professionalised the island's legal and data systems at the cost of local independence. Before 2016, the island operated its own postal service and issued unique stamps. Following the merger into a regional council, Australia Post took over all mail services, assigning the island the postcode 2899. Economically, tourism is the primary driver and has grown steadily. To protect the local environment, the importation of fresh fruit and vegetables is prohibited, so most produce is grown locally. Beef is both raised on the island and imported. The island even boasts its own winery, Two Chimneys Wines, demonstrating a commitment to local production despite the challenges of a small, isolated market. The Australian government controls the Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ, extending 200 nautical miles around the island, an area of 428,000 square kilometers. Islanders believe revenue from these waters, primarily from fishing, should fund local services, similar to how the Northern Territory accesses mineral resource wealth. Currently, locals only have recreational fishing rights in a small area called the Box. While the EEZ provides the island's only major natural resource, there is unproven speculation about oil and gas deposits. With no major arable land and only 25% permanent pasture, the island relies heavily on the ocean for its economic potential. In 2015, the company Auscan was granted a license to grow medicinal cannabis on Norfolk Island, a move seen by many as a potential economic savior. However, the federal government intervened, and the local license was revoked by the administrator. This led to tension, as federal authorities preferred to centralize medicinal cannabis trials on the mainland. This incident served as a stark example of the federal government's willingness to override local economic initiatives to maintain strict regulatory control, further fueling local resentment regarding the loss of self-governance and the ability to pioneer new local industries. Historically, Norfolk was a tax haven with no income tax. The local assembly funded the island through import duties, a 12% GST, and various levies. This status ended in 2016 when income tax was introduced following the 2010 financial bailout. Residents also gained access to social services previously unavailable to them. Communication infrastructure includes about 2,500 telephone lines and 2 local radio stations. While there is no dedicated local ABC station, the island receives broadcasts from ABC Western Plains in Dubbo. These updates to taxes and communications represent the island's gradual but total integration into the Australian national framework. Television arrived in 1963, and today residents receive local programming via Norfolk TV alongside major Australian channels like ABC, SBS, 7, and 9. The island uses the NF internet domain. While mobile service was limited to a basic 2G network for years with no data, an 8-tower 4G LTE network was installed in 2018. This significantly improved data speeds and connectivity for both residents and the tourism industry. These technological advancements have helped bridge the geographical gap between the island and the mainland, though the infrastructure remains small-scale compared to typical Australian urban environments. Transportation remains a major hurdle as there are no railways, harbours, or deep-water ports. Supply ships must stay offshore, with cargo brought to the Kingston or Cascade jetties by whaleboats in 5-ton increments. A mobile crane then lifts the freight onto the pier. This labor-intensive process is weather-dependent, often requiring ships to move to the leeward side of the island. The road network consists of 80 kilometers of roads, only 53 of which are paved. Driving is on the left, but a unique local law gives wandering livestock the right of way over motor vehicles. Road safety is managed with low speed limits, 50 km per hour generally, and as low as 30 km per hour near schools. A charming local tradition is the Norfolk wave, where drivers acknowledge every passing car. Air travel is the only way for people to reach the island, with Qantas and Air Chatham's providing flights from Sydney, Brisbane, and Auckland. A local airline briefly operated until 2018. Following the 2021 reopening of the Trans-Tasman bubble, weekly service from Auckland resumed. These flights are essential for tourism and for residents travelling for medical care, making the airport the island's most critical infrastructure link. Electricity is primarily generated by diesel generators, though some residents have private solar panels. In the world of sport, Norfolk Island punches above its weight, competing independently in the Commonwealth Games and winning 2 bronze medals in lawn bowls. It also participates in and has hosted the Pacific Mini Games. The island supports national teams in rugby league, cricket, and netball and is a member of World Athletics. This sporting independence is one of the few remaining areas where Norfolk Island continues to represent itself as a distinct entity on the international stage, separate from the broader Australian nation.